Faithfully conveying value, interpreting great books worldwide. Hello, this is Sally Book Talk. I'm Wu Haiyun, the interpreter of this book. Today, I'm introducing you to the book called Auschwitz, A History. Auschwitz was Nazi Germany's largest concentration camp, a death factory that massacred over 1 million Jews. For more than half a century, numerous books and various artworks have described and reflected on Auschwitz. Despite that, Auschwitz, A History, as a newly published work, is still worth your understanding. The history of Auschwitz presented in this book is far more complex than just a death factory. The author of this book, Lawrence Rees, is a British historian and documentary director, once rated by The Times as Britain's most outstanding historical documentary producer. In 2005, on the 60th anniversary of Germany's surrender, Rees's 6-episode documentary, Auschwitz, was broadcast on the BBC. The content of that documentary is encapsulated in this book, Auschwitz, A History. This book first traces the development of Auschwitz, introduces the changes in Nazi policies toward Jews, and how those policies influenced the role of Auschwitz concentration camp. Then, the author discusses how the Holocaust distorted human nature. This distortion appeared not only in the Nazis who executed death orders, but also in the Jewish prisoners at the time. To illustrate this, the author uses a large number of oral recollections from witnesses. This comparative novelty is a major feature of the book. Finally, Rees also shows that the evil of Auschwitz wasn't just Hitler's or the Nazi leadership's. It was a result of deeply rooted anti-Semitism throughout Europe. Now, I'll take you into Rees's book to re-understand and reflect on the concentration camp system represented by Auschwitz. First, let's understand the evolution of Auschwitz. Hundreds of thousands of Jews arrived in overcrowded trains or taken to gas chambers to be killed, and their bodies sent to crematoria. Many living people turned into a wisp of smoke soon after arriving in Auschwitz. This is the Auschwitz familiar to the public, a terrifying, unimaginable scene of killing. However, this isn't the whole of Auschwitz. You should know that Auschwitz wasn't solely an extermination camp for killing Jews. At least initially, when it was first built, it was just a transit station responsible for temporarily detaining prisoners who were being transported to other concentration camps in the Third Reich. In Nazi terminology at the time, Auschwitz was a quarantine camp. The reason it developed into the largest killing ground for Jews within just 5 years has a lot to do with its commander, Rudolf Höss. In April 1940, Höss, age 39, came to Auschwitz to serve as commander. Before that, Hess had already worked in the SS for 6 years. Höss was a farmer's son and a loving father at home. He had deep reverence for Hitler and his Nazi party, so he voluntarily joined the SS and came to Auschwitz to be commander. For Höss, this meant status, privileges, and the opportunity to participate in the development of the new Germany. He was ambitious to build Auschwitz into a model concentration camp for the Nazi Empire. In September 1940, Höss received the head of the SS Administrative and Economic Head Office. During the inspection, Pohl saw sand and gravel pits near the quarantine camp and thought this could provide labor for the German Earth and Stoneworks Limited, operated by the SS. So he demanded that Höss expand the camp. 2 months later, a higher-level leader came to inspect. That is, Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS and Gestapo. Himmler, because both Höss and Himmler had been farmers and shared a deep, almost mystical attachment to the land. During that inspection, the two hit it off immediately, and Himmler hoped to turn Auschwitz into a German agricultural utopia. After the inspections by the two leaders, Auschwitz's status rose significantly from a quarantine camp originally responsible for temporarily detaining prisoners to a source of cheap labor for the Nazis. Thus, on the gate of Auschwitz concentration camp appeared a slogan, Work sets you free. It was during that time that Host established the basic system at Auschwitz. These systems guided the operation of Auschwitz throughout the next 4 years. Among these, the most important was the capo system. The term capo comes from Italian, meaning head or boss. Camp administrators selected a prisoner from each section to serve as capo, letting them manage other prisoners. The initial prisoners at Auschwitz were a group of German criminals. Some were released, some became the first capos, guarding later arriving Polish prisoners. From among those Polish prisoners, more capos emerged, who acted as enforcers for the SS, managing later Soviet captives and Jews with extremely brutal methods. In 1941, the industrial giant IG Farben also came to Auschwitz and built a factory producing synthetic rubber 3 miles east of the concentration camp. To meet production demands, the total number of prisoners at Auschwitz increased from 10,000 to 30,000. Soon after, cement plants, military factories, and power plants also arrived. By 1944, 28 factory subcamps had been built around Auschwitz, with over 40,000 prisoners performing forced labor there. It is estimated that, as a labor concentration camp, Auschwitz generated approximately 30 million marks in net profit for Nazi Germany. Of course, Auschwitz wasn't just a concentration camp, it was also an extermination camp. When did it start mass murdering Jews? Also, in July of that same year, 1941, Himmler ordered the solution of Jews who had no use value and were purely wasting rations. This meant that the Nazi persecution of Jews entered a conceptually different phase: physical extermination. It should be noted that the Nazi genocide of the Jews was a result of cumulative radicalization. They initially had no plan for mass murder. Even the Nazi leadership disagreed with directly, physically exterminating the Jewish people. In 1940, Himmler wrote in a memorandum, "We do not want to adopt the method of physically exterminating an entire people, because that is fundamentally un-German and impossible to achieve." And in the same year, Himmler's deputy Heydrich issued a statement saying that physical extermination was an undignified act for a civilized nation like Germany. At the time, they even considered that once the war ended, they would pack Jews onto ships and transport them to Africa. For example, officials from the German Foreign Office drafted a plan declaring the African island nation of Madagascar as the destination for Jews. However, they encountered problems in practical implementation and devised radical strategies in response. For instance, initially they needed to solve the housing shortage for German immigrants, so they evicted Jews from their homes and moved Germans in. Then, when food shortages arose, they drove Jews into ghettos and left them to fend for themselves. As the German army suffered continuous defeats on the Eastern Front, the Nazis became increasingly agitated. Originally, they had even considered implementing mass sterilization of Jews to allow the race to disappear naturally. But sterilization operations were just too slow, not as clean and efficient as direct killing. Thus, the Nazis' final solution was proposed. Nazi officers initially used machine guns for mass shootings, but soon found this method inefficient and psychologically burdensome for soldiers. They also experimented by placing mentally ill victims and explosives in a pit to blow them up. But the explosives weren't strong enough, and wounded victims crawled out screaming, limb fragments scattered everywhere, even hanging from trees. After these experiments, Nazis found the optimal killing method: poison gas. Thus, they began constructing gas chambers. The first camp to use gas was Chelmno Extermination Camp. At this point, Host stepped forward again, planning to build Germany's most efficient extermination camp next to Auschwitz. His deputy Fritzsche suggested using Zyklon B, a chemical originally for insect control, for killing humans. After experiments, Zyklon B was confirmed as Auschwitz's primary killing agent. with method-secured, host-built gas chambers and crematoria. In February 1942, the first facility, Little Red House, was completed with 2 gas chambers, killing 800 at once. Soon after, the second Little White House was retrofitted. It had 4 gas chambers, killing 1,200 simultaneously, with better ventilation than the Red House, significantly increasing efficiency. In July 1942, Himmler inspected Auschwitz again, observing Jews being gassed in the White House. Himmler was clearly satisfied. Shortly after this inspection, Höss was promoted. But note that at that time, Auschwitz's role in the Holocaust remained relatively limited. In 1942, Nazis primarily massacred Jews within Poland. This task fell mainly to 3 extermination camps in Polish forests: Belzec, Sobibor, and Treblinka. After successfully massacring Polish Jews, Nazis vigorously erased traces of these camps. Long before war's end, these camps were dismantled, their sites restored to forests or farmland. Today, people talk extensively about Auschwitz, not only because it wasn't demolished by the Nazis in time, but also for 2 other main reasons. The first reason is that Auschwitz's model reconciled internal Nazi disagreements over Jewish treatment. You see, within the Nazis, there were always 2 schools of thought. One believed Jews should work for the Reich. The other believed all Jews should die. At the January 1942 Wannsee Conference, Himmler's deputy Heydrich proposed making Jews perform grueling labor until death, thus combining both positions. By 1943, Himmler realized only Auschwitz could perfectly integrate work and extermination within Nazi Germany, because it was both concentration camp and extermination camp. Jews arriving at Auschwitz were immediately sorted into 2 categories at the train station. The healthy and strong were first sent to nearby subcamps for forced labor. After months of abuse and exploitation, they were sent miles away to be killed. Those failing selection were exterminated immediately. The second reason was SS men like Höss competing to transform Auschwitz for greater killing efficiency. By summer 1943, Auschwitz had 4 integrated gas chamber crematorium buildings, capable of killing 4,770 people daily and processing bodies. This concludes Auschwitz's development into the notorious death factory. Next, I'll discuss how the concentration camp system, represented by Auschwitz, distorted human nature. The SS men killing Jews weren't psychopaths. Many were educated elites who consciously perfected their work for career advancement. Auschwitz's managers invented methods to ensure smooth mass murder. Höss emphasized in his memoirs that successful large-scale extermination depended crucially on maintaining an extremely calm atmosphere throughout. First, they ensured new arrivals believed entering gas chambers was routine procedure, not death, but disinfection showers. On the path from the train platform to the gas chamber, SS soldiers walked alongside Jews, smiling and exchanging pleasantries. The gas chamber building appeared completely non-threatening, with flowers on windowsills and fruit trees in the yard. Before entering the gas chamber, a soldier would tell Jews, "You're now going for showers and disinfection. We don't want epidemics in the camp. Remove your clothes and place them on the ground before you." Why did they require Jews to undress? Because in earlier gassings, where prisoners died clothed, removing garments became extremely difficult, hindering resource recycling. Now, the condemned undressed themselves, many neatly folding their clothes. Thus, Auschwitz evolved from quarantine camp to efficient killing factory. Clearly, throughout this process, camp administrators worked diligently, maximizing initiative and creativity. To avoid breaking down, these Nazis had to remain indifferent to their work. For instance, Jose occasionally felt psychological discomfort, but knew how to cope, galloping his horse or drinking to forget. Auschwitz doctors were no different. Jews arriving at Auschwitz first underwent selection. So who performed this selection? because doctors could instantly judge fitness for work or lack of value, decisions taking mere seconds. From 1942, when selections began, Nazi doctors played crucial roles in Auschwitz's mass killings. Doctors personally deciding life or death blatantly violated their healing oath. Moreover, they conducted horrific live medical experiments on Jews. Most infamous was Dr. Mengele's twin research. Before Auschwitz, nothing suggested Mengele would become a sadist. He held a medical doctorate from Munich University and was an Eastern Front war hero, impeccably dressed and impeccably mannered in daily life. After arriving in 1943, Mengele collected hundreds of Jewish twin pairs, like stamps, performing live experiments on them. If one twin died from torture, an autopsy was performed immediately for comparative experiments. Medical experiments on Jews weren't limited to Nazi military doctors. Earlier, we mentioned IG Farben had a large labor camp near Auschwitz. This industrial giant had a pharmaceutical subsidiary called Bayer. This company still exists today. The famous aspirin was developed by Bayer. In Auschwitz archives, a letter from Bayer to camp authorities was found describing their anesthetic experiment results. The letter stated 150 women arrived in good condition. However, we couldn't draw conclusions because they all died during the experiment. We sincerely request another 150 women will pay the same fee. 170 marks per person. If doctors and researchers were like this, Nazi soldiers carrying out killings were naturally crueler. According to survivors, SS officers joked while working, even treating corpse burning as entertainment, because burning bodies made gas in organs expand, causing corpses to appear to jump. Men's genitals might suddenly erect, making soldiers laugh uproariously. One SS guard would periodically select 7 or 8 pretty girls, force them to strip naked before Jewish men, then shoot them in the chest or genitals. Now, you might wonder, how could Jewish survivors witness this? How could they see it? Shouldn't they have been killed too? This reveals another dark fact about Nazi extermination camps. The SS had assistants during massacres, and those assistants were Jews. These Jews were organized into special units called Sonderkommando. Sonderkommando handled the heaviest tasks, clearing corpses from gas chambers, cutting hair, searching for hidden jewelry or gold teeth, then burying or burning bodies. Of course, this entire set of work by the Jewish Sonderkommando was carried out under the supervision of the Nazi SS, but usually only 2 SS soldiers were present on site, and even during the peak of Auschwitz's killings, the number of SS soldiers was minimal. In other words, the Jewish corpses were always handled by Jews themselves. Sometimes, when fewer Jews arrived by train, using the large gas chambers wasn't economical. In such cases, the Sonderkommando were responsible for dragging their fellow Jews by the ears and escorting them one by one so that the SS soldiers could shoot them. If the story of the Nazi SS tells how dark human nature can be, the story of the Jewish Sonderkommando shows how cowardly it can be. Those young Jewish men witnessed the fate of their fellow Jews every day, knowing it could be their own tomorrow. But even so, they didn't resist or commit suicide. They just lived on, assisting the Nazis in exterminating their own people. What were they thinking in their hearts? A survivor of Auschwitz named Pressburger was once a member of the Sonderkommando. When he first joined, Auschwitz hadn't yet built powerful crematoriums. Most corpses were hastily buried. Pressburger was responsible for dragging the corpses into a large pit, sprinkling wet lime powder and soil over them until covered. But this method had major flaws. When summer came, the bodies in the pit began to rot, making Pressburger's work even more horrifying. He had to descend into the pit amidst the suffocating stench of decay, picking up body fragments with his hands, sometimes a human head, sometimes a leg. But he just wanted to survive, and to survive he had no choice but to do this job. Pressburger realized that the only way to keep living was to ignore everything happening around him. To live long, you must survive. Another Sonderkommando member named Dario recalled, "At that time, we had no feelings. We knew our days were numbered. In such an environment, we definitely wouldn't live to the end." But we gradually got used to it. The desire to survive was so strong that no matter how bad things got, you could always find the strength to live to the next day. Every day, we had to burn corpses. Day after day after day, you gradually get used to it. Similarly, another Auschwitz survivor named Parkinski used the word habit to explain the psychology of the Jews at that time. People became indifferent. Today it's you going in, tomorrow it's me, and you don't care. You can actually get used to anything. Parkinski survived because he could cut hair. Usually, he worked in the SS office building at Auschwitz, cutting officers' hair. Once he even cut Haas's hair. With a razor in hand, he could have slit Haas's throat, but didn't, knowing it would kill him, his family, half the camp, and a replacement would come. Now consider another survivor's account. Blatt, a Polish Jew who assisted Nazi killings at Sobibor extermination camp. From cutting hair and organizing clothes to unloading train luggage and cleaning the camp, all these operations, maintaining the extermination camp, were done by Jews like him. Blatt survived not by submission, but by joining Sobibor's uprising. The rebellion's leaders weren't Jews, but Soviets. In September 1943, Soviet POWs arrived at Sobibor. 80 became laborers. They quickly formed an underground resistance led by Red Army Lieutenant Petrisky. Before their arrival, Jewish prisoners were resigned. Escape attempts during outside labor mostly failed. The Soviets, within 2 weeks of arriving, started digging an escape tunnel. But they realized sneaking 600 plus prisoners out in one night wasn't feasible. Survival required armed revolt. It was October. Snow would fall in weeks. Snow would let Germans track escapees by footprints. Rebellion had to happen fast. Within days, Petrisky's group finalized their plan. I'd collect knives or axes during labor, lure SS soldiers to remote corners to kill them, then take their guns. On October 14th at Sobibor, most SS guards were eliminated over one day. But the extermination camp commander was still alive. Prisoners gathered, as usual, at 5 p.m. for roll call. So, at that moment, Petrisky jumped onto a table and gave a speech. He said, "All this before us will change, peace will come. If anyone survives, their duty is to tell the world what happened here." And Petrisky's speech inspired the hesitant Jewish prisoners. Then the commander realized the danger and fired machine guns from the watchtower. Prisoners broke through barbed wire into the forest, despite mines and gunfire. That day, about half of Sobibor's 600 prisoners escaped, with 50 surviving the war. This armed rebellion became the only successful mass escape in camp history, indirectly causing Sobibor's permanent closure. Before this uprising, 250,000 Jews had already died at Sobibor. Half a century later, Blatt told Rees in an interview, "I can only be sure of one thing. No one truly knows themselves. You meet a kind person on the street asking directions to North Street. He walks half a block with you, giving directions warmly. Yet, in different circumstances, that same person could become a terrifying sadist. No one knows themselves. Anyone could become good or evil in different situations. When meeting exceptionally kind people, I wonder, what would they become in Sobibor? Whether Sobibor or Auschwitz, human nature underwent unbelievable transformations. These stories show humans can adapt to anything. Darkness, cowardice, human depravity has no limits. After discussing how the camp system twisted humanity, we finally examined its root evil. European anti-Semitism. Auschwitz wasn't isolated. Nazi Germany's first extermination camp was Chelmno. In 1942, Nazis' deadliest year, the top killing camps were Belzec, Sobibor, and Treblinka, not Auschwitz. Combining all Nazi extermination camps merely represents an extreme manifestation of European anti-Semitism. This demonstrates Auschwitz wasn't an isolated event, but the end point of a prolonged historical process. Trains overflowing with Jews arrived in waves at Auschwitz, all originating from Nazi-occupied European nations. Hungary sent the most Jews to Auschwitz, 438,000, followed by Poland with 300,000. France, Netherlands, and Greece each sent over 50,000. In these countries, Nazi persecution of Jews followed identical patterns. First came registration, then property confiscation, followed by ghettoization, and finally deportation trains to extermination camps. Throughout this, national governments complied silently and completely. The root of this compliance was deeply ingrained anti-Semitism in Western civilization. Take Slovakia. In fall 1941, Nazis demanded Jewish laborers from them. By February 1942, Slovakia handed over 20,000 Jews, families included. But Nazis rejected children and elderly, since Germany lacked mass killing capacity and refused non-workers. To resolve this, Slovakia offered to pay Germany 500 marks per deported Jew, on condition they'd never return to Slovakia, meaning Slovakia paid Germany to remove all Jews. The Slovak prime minister who ordered this was a former Roman Catholic priest politician. What about ordinary citizens? Consider this small example. In April 1943, Germany deported all Jews from Izbika, Poland. Among them was Blatt, the same Sobibor escapee mentioned earlier. Blatt was just 15, desperately fleeing when he spotted classmate Yannick and screamed, "Yannick, save me!" Janek replied, "No problem. Head to my family's barn." Moments later, Janek arrived with a Nazi soldier and captured Blatt in that barn. Rumors circulated at the time that Nazis made soap from human bodies. So Yannick said to Blatt, "Goodbye. Next time we meet, you'll be on a soap shop shelf." Having covered Nazi Germany's allies, let's examine their opponents. Evidence shows Britain and America took no action despite knowing about Auschwitz's extermination of Jews. As early as 1941, the Nazi extermination policy was no secret in the West. Churchill himself publicly addressed the Nazi genocide policy. In July 1942, a London magazine listed 22 sites of Nazi atrocities, including Auschwitz. In April 1944, 4 prisoners escaped, and their accounts became the famous Auschwitz Report. Because of this report, the World Jewish Congress petitioned Washington's War Refugee Committee in June, urging allies to bomb the railway to Auschwitz. But the allies flatly refused, deeming it impractical and a diversion of bombs from decisive battles. Notably, the allies made this decision hastily. No aerial reconnaissance of camps occurred, no feasibility studies, no evaluation of alternatives, meaning bombing viability wasn't seriously considered. Behind this lies a fact that shames people today. Nobody treated Auschwitz as important at the time. When Auschwitz was finally liberated, Jewish survivors returning home still faced severe discrimination. Linda, a Slovak Jew whose entire family perished at Auschwitz, returned to find strangers in her home. A man opened the door and shouted, "Wherever you came from, go back there," and slammed the door in her face. Shocked, Linda discovered her relatives' homes now housed Soviets. Former acquaintances avoided her like poison, as if she shouldn't have returned. Linda left her hometown the next day, later starting a new life in California, USA. Though Linda survived Auschwitz, she considered that homecoming her most painful experience. Humans fundamentally need justice. But Auschwitz history offers no such comfort. After such profound suffering, many Holocaust survivors like Linda still faced prejudice and harm. Meanwhile, most perpetrators with bloodstained hands faced no punishment. The book Auschwitz points out that most SS members who worked there faced no consequences. Moreover, some remained completely unrepentant for their actions. They believed the genocide was condemned only because Germany lost, not because it was inherently wrong. During Risa's interviews, many former Nazis at Auschwitz recounted their crimes with relish, some even describing it as paradise. Hans Friedrich, who murdered Jews, told Reese, "I can't say I'm sorry now. You can say I killed people, but I knew who I was killing. I'm not proud or ashamed. I sleep well, eat well, life goes on." Reese once pressed a former loyal Nazi party member, "Why did so many support that horrific regime?" The man retorted angrily, "The problem today is untested people judging those who were tested." Anti-Semitism persists even among today's youth. In Lithuania, a 25-year-old officer showed Reese a fortress where masses of Jews were massacred in 1941. Hearing Reese's documentary purpose, the officer said, "You know what? You're missing the real story, not what we did to Jews, but what Jews did to us." Clearly, the ghost of anti-Semitism still haunts us. More broadly, the hatred between groups, the will to oppress, retaliate, even exterminate, still exists. That's why, though the Holocaust ended over half a century ago, reflection remains essential and why we'll always need Auschwitz, a history. That wraps up today's interpretation. You'll find the reading notes below the audio. See you tomorrow.